The stars burned like cold diamonds against the black void as Commander Zara Veltar stood on the bridge of her massive warship. The Shadowbane stretched 3 miles from bow to stern, its dark hull bristling with weapons that had reduced entire cities to ash. She was tall and elegant, with silver skin that caught the light and violet eyes that held no mercy. Her people, the Velkari, had conquered 47 worlds in the name of their empire, and today they would make it 40-8. Earth hung before them like a blue jewel, spinning slowly in the darkness. Zara studied the primitive world through the view screen, her fingers drumming against the command console. The planet looked peaceful, almost innocent, with its white clouds and green continents. Intelligence reports showed the humans had barely mastered space travel and possessed no energy shields or plasma weapons. This would be the easiest conquest of her career. "Commander, all weapon systems are ready," reported her tactical officer, a young Velkari named Cole. His eagerness reminded Zara of herself when she first joined the fleet 20 years ago. Back then, she believed the Empire's message that conquest brought order to chaos, that weaker species needed their guidance to survive in a hostile galaxy. "Begin the demonstration," Zara ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. The plan was simple: destroy a few major cities to show the humans their helplessness, then demand their surrender. Most species submitted after seeing their greatest achievements reduced to rubble. The Shadowbane's main guns began to charge, their deep hum vibrating through the deck plates. Zara watched the energy readings climb steadily, each number bringing them closer to another world's subjugation. But as the weapons reached full power, something unexpected happened. The ship's instruments began flickering, displaying error. Messages that shouldn't exist. "What's happening?" Zara demanded, turning to her science officer. "Unknown interference, Commander. The planet's magnetic field is different than our scans indicated. It's disrupting our targeting systems." Zara frowned. Their technology was advanced beyond anything these humans possessed. A simple magnetic field shouldn't affect their weapons. "Compensate and fire anyway." The tactical officer pressed the firing sequence, but instead of the usual controlled discharge, the weapons erupted in a chaotic burst of energy. Sparks flew from control panels as the ship's power grid overloaded. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red as alarms blared throughout the vessel. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, someone shouted over the noise. "We're losing atmospheric pressure." Zara felt the deck shift beneath her feet as the great ship began to fall toward the planet below. Through the view screen she could see Earth growing larger, its blue atmosphere rushing up to meet them. The Shadowbane had survived battles against entire fleets, but Earth's magnetic field had done what no enemy weapon could accomplish. "All hands, prepare for emergency landing," Zara commanded, though she knew most of her crew wouldn't survive. The impact. The ship was too damaged to maintain a controlled descent. They were going to crash, and crash hard. The last thing Zara remembered was the terrible sound of metal tearing and the sensation of falling through darkness. Jake Miller had been a park ranger in Montana for 8 years, and he thought he'd seen everything the wilderness could offer. Bears, mountain lions, lost hikers, and the occasional illegal campfire were part of his daily routine. But as he drove his truck along the remote forest road that morning, he definitely hadn't expected to see a massive object streak across the sky, trailing smoke and fire. The impact shook the ground like an earthquake, sending birds fleeing from the trees and causing Jake to grip his steering wheel tighter. A pillar of black smoke rose from somewhere deep in the forest, and he could smell burning metal on the wind. His radio crackled with emergency calls from other rangers and local authorities, but Jake was closest to the crash site. He parked his truck at the end of the road and continued on foot, following a trail of broken trees and scattered debris. The object had carved a path through the forest like a giant plow, leaving a scar in the earth that stretched for miles. Jake had expected to find the wreckage of an airplane or maybe a military prototype, but what he discovered defied all explanation. The ship was enormous, easily the size of a city block, with a sleek design that looked nothing like human technology. Its hull was black as midnight and covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift in the light. Steam rose from cracks in the metal, and Jake could hear the groaning of stressed materials cooling in the mountain air. Most of the vessel was buried in the earth, but Jake could see bodies scattered around the impact site. They weren't human bodies. The creatures were tall and thin, with silver skin and strange clothing that looked like armor. All of them appeared to be dead, their violet eyes staring sightlessly at the sky. Jake was about to call for backup when he heard something that made him freeze. A low moan was coming from somewhere inside the wreckage. Someone was alive in there, and they were hurt. His ranger training kicked in, overriding his shock and fear. Injured was injured, no matter what species they belonged to. Jake climbed through a gap in the hull, using his flashlight to navigate the twisted corridors inside. The ship's interior was a maze of collapsed beams and sparking electronics, but he followed the sound of labored breathing deeper into the wreckage. He found her in what might have been the bridge, pinned under a fallen beam but still alive. She was clearly the same species as the others, but something about her was different. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, even while injured, or the complex markings on her armor that suggested rank. Her silver blood pooled beneath her, and her breathing was shallow and pained. When their eyes met, Jake saw intelligence there and something else. Confusion, perhaps, or surprise. She tried to speak, but the words came out in a language he didn't understand. Her hand moved weakly toward what looked like a weapon at her side. "Easy there," Jake said softly, the same tone he used with injured animals. "I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him with those violet eyes, and Jake could see her trying to process what was happening. Here was a member of the species she'd come to conquer, but instead of running away or attacking, he was kneeling beside her with concern on his face. Jake assessed her injuries with practiced efficiency. The beam had crushed her left leg, and she was losing blood from several wounds. Without immediate medical attention, she would die, alien or not. He couldn't lift the beam alone, but he could stabilize her and get her to safety. "This is going to hurt," he warned, though he doubted she understood his words. She seemed to understand his intent, however, and nodded weakly. Working carefully, Jake managed to free her from the wreckage and carry her from the ship. She was surprisingly light despite her height, and she didn't struggle or try to escape. Instead, she watched his face with an expression of growing bewilderment. By the time they reached his truck, Jake could hear helicopters in the distance. The military would be here soon, and they would have questions he couldn't answer. But looking down at the injured woman in his arms, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of waiting for the authorities, Jake drove deeper into the forest toward his cabin. He told himself it was just until he could treat her wounds, but deep down he knew it was more than that. Something in her eyes had spoken to him, a recognition that went beyond species or language. Zara Veltar had come to conquer Earth, but she was about to discover that some victories came in forms no warrior could anticipate. Zara woke to the smell of wood smoke and something cooking that she didn't recognize. Her body ached in ways she had never experienced before, and when she tried to move, sharp pain shot through her left leg. The surface beneath her was soft, unlike the metal beds of her ship, and warm light filtered through what appeared to be transparent panels in the walls. She was in a small room with wooden walls and simple furniture. Medical supplies were scattered on a nearby table, and she could see white bandages wrapped around her leg and torso. Her armor was gone, replaced by soft human clothing that felt strange against her silver skin. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was completely vulnerable. In the hands of the enemy, the door opened, and the human male from the crash site entered carrying a tray of food. He moved slowly, probably trying not to startle her, and set the tray on the table beside her bed. Up close, she could see that he was older than most soldiers she had encountered, with kind eyes and gentle hands that showed no fear of her. "You're awake," he said, his voice carrying the same calm tone he had used at the crash site. "I'm Jake. I brought you some soup and water. You need to keep your strength up." Zara stared at him, trying to understand his behavior. In her experience, conquered species either cowered in terror or fought with desperate fury. They didn't tend to injured enemies or speak in soothing voices. This human's actions made no sense according to everything she had learned about warfare and conquest. "Why?" she asked, the word coming out rough and heavily accented. It was one of the few human words she had learned during her mission briefings. Jake seemed to understand her confusion. He pulled a chair closer to her bed and sat down, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "Because you were hurt," he said simply. "And because it was the right thing to do?" Over the following days, Jake continued to care for her with a patience that baffled Zara completely. He cleaned her wounds, changed her bandages, and brought her food without asking for anything in return. When she was strong enough to sit up, he helped her to a chair by the window where she could look out at the forest. The view was unlike anything Zara had ever seen. Her homeworld was a harsh place of metal cities and red skies, where nature had long ago been conquered and controlled. But here, green trees swayed in the breeze, and small creatures moved freely through the undergrowth. The sight stirred something in her chest that she couldn't identify. "It's beautiful," she said one morning, surprised by her own words. She had never used that word to describe anything before. Jake smiled and joined her at the window. "This is my favorite time of day. The light hits the trees just right, and you can see the whole valley from here." As her strength returned, Zara began to plan her escape. She was a trained warrior, and despite her injuries, she was confident she could overpower this lone human. But each time she prepared to act, something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Jake hummed while he cooked, or how he talked to her about his work protecting the forest, or the genuine concern in his eyes when he checked her wounds one evening. As Jake tended the fire in his small fireplace, Zara finally asked the question that had been troubling her. "Why do you help me? Your people and mine are enemies." Jake looked up from the flames, his expression thoughtful. "Are we? I mean, I know you're not from Earth, and I'm guessing you weren't exactly here for a friendly visit. But sitting here, talking with you, you don't feel like an enemy." "I came to conquer your world," Zara said, testing his reaction. "My ship carried enough weapons to destroy your cities." "But you didn't," Jake pointed out. "You crashed instead. And now you're here, drinking my coffee and watching the sunset. People can change, can't they?" The concept of change was foreign to Zara. In the Valkyrie Empire, you were born into your role and lived it until death. Warriors conquered, scientists researched, and workers labored. There was no room for questioning or growth, only duty and obedience. But as the weeks passed, Zara began to see the world through Jake's eyes. He took her on short walks through the forest, supporting her weight when her injured leg grew tired. He showed her how different plants grew, how animals lived together in complex relationships, and how the whole ecosystem worked in harmony without anyone ruling over it. "Your people don't have leaders?" she asked one day as they watched a family of deer graze peacefully in a nearby meadow. "Oh, we have leaders," Jake said with a chuckle. "Too many of them, if you ask me. But these animals, they just live. They don't need someone telling them how to be deer." The idea fascinated Zara. On her world, every aspect of life was controlled and regulated. Citizens were told what to eat, where to live, and how to think. The notion that creatures could simply exist without constant oversight was revolutionary. Jake also introduced her to human culture in ways her military briefings had never covered. He played music for her on an old device, and the melodies stirred emotions she didn't know she possessed. He showed her books filled with stories of love and adventure, concepts that barely existed in Valkyrie society. "Your people create these just for pleasure?" she asked, holding a book of poetry. "Some of them," Jake said. "Art, music, stories, they help us understand ourselves and each other. They make life more than just survival." One night, as they sat on his porch watching the stars, Jake asked her about her home. Zara found herself talking about things she had never shared with anyone. Her loneliness in the vast Imperial fleet, her doubts about the endless wars, and her dreams of seeing something beautiful instead of just destroying it. "I've spent my Whole life taking worlds from other species, she said quietly. I never thought about what we were destroying until I saw this place. Jake reached over and gently took her hand. The touch was warm and comforting, nothing like the cold efficiency of her people. You're not destroying anything now, he said. You're here, learning and growing. That's what matters. As Zara looked into his kind eyes, she felt something she had never experienced before. It was warm and frightening and wonderful all at once. She didn't have a word for it in her language, but Jake had taught her the human term, love. The realization terrified her more than any battle she had ever fought. She was falling in love with a human, with the enemy she had come to conquer. But as his thumb traced gentle circles on her hand, she knew there was no going back, somewhere above them. Her people were planning their next move, preparing to invade this peaceful world. And Zara would have to choose between everything she had ever known and everything she was beginning to hope for. The morning sky was filled with dark shapes that blotted out the sun. Zara stood at Jake's window, her heart pounding as she watched the massive Valkyrie warships descend through Earth's atmosphere like metal storm clouds. The invasion fleet had arrived 3 weeks earlier than planned, and she knew exactly why they were here. Jake, she called, her voice tight with fear. You need to see this. He joined her at the window, coffee mug in hand, and his face went pale as he saw the ships. There were dozens of them, each one capable of destroying entire cities. The lead vessel was the Dark Star, Admiral Keth Mordek's flagship, and Zara knew the old warrior would show no mercy to the humans below. Those are your people, Jake said quietly. It wasn't a question. Zara nodded, unable to speak. She had hoped for more time, more days of peace in this small cabin with this gentle human who had taught her what love meant. But war had found them, and now she would have to choose between the life she had known and the life she wanted. They think I'm dead, she finally managed. When I don't report in, they assume the worst and send the full invasion force. Jake set down his coffee and took her hands in his. What does that mean for us? For Earth? It means your people have maybe hours before the bombardment begins, Zara said, hating the words as they left her mouth. Mordek doesn't believe in long negotiations. He'll destroy your major cities first, then demand surrender. Through the window, they could see smaller ships breaking off from the main fleet and heading toward population centers. Zara recognized the attack pattern from dozens of other conquests. First the orbital strikes, then the ground forces, then the systematic breaking of any resistance. I have to stop this, she said, though she wasn't sure how. Her own people would consider her a traitor, and the humans would never trust her. She was caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. Jake's grip on her hands tightened. We'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this. The simple words hit Zara harder than any weapon. In her entire life, no one had ever offered to stand beside her, to share her burden. The Valkyrie way was individual strength and personal glory, but Jake was offering something different. Partnership. Your people need to evacuate the cities, Zara said, forcing herself to think tactically. The first strikes will target government centers and military bases. If they scatter to smaller towns, more will survive. Jake was already reaching for his radio, but Zara caught his arm. They won't believe a park ranger about an alien invasion. You need proof. She walked to the corner, where Jake had stored her damaged armor and weapons. The communication device was still functional, though cracked. She activated it and showed Jake the tactical displays showing the fleet positions and attack vectors. This is their invasion plan, she explained. Times, targets, everything. Can your people use this? Jake studied the alien writing, then looked at her with something like awe. You're willing to betray your own people for us? They're not my people anymore, Zara said, surprised by how true the words felt. You are. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Jake contacted his superiors, who contacted their superiors. And soon Zara found herself in a secure government facility being questioned by military officials who could barely hide their amazement at her existence. General Patricia Collins, a sharp-eyed woman with graying hair, led the interrogation. You're telling us that you're the commander of the ship that crashed in Montana, and now you want to help us fight your own people? I want to prevent a war that will destroy both our species, Zara corrected. My people are powerful, but they're not used to real resistance. If your military strikes at the right time and place, you can create enough chaos to force a negotiation. And why should we trust you? Another officer asked. How do we know this isn't some kind of trap? Zara looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. Because I've learned something here that my people have forgotten. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from choosing not to fight. She spent the next several hours providing detailed intelligence about Valkyrie weapons, shield frequencies, and tactical weaknesses. She drew diagrams of ship layouts and explained how their command structure worked. Every secret she revealed felt like another step away from her old life and toward something new, but as the day wore on, reports came in from around the world. The Valkyrie fleet had begun its attacks and entire cities were burning. New York, London, Tokyo, all had been hit by orbital strikes that left nothing but craters where millions of people had lived. We're too late, General Collins said, her face grim as she read the casualty reports. They're not going to negotiate. They're going to wipe us out. Zara felt the weight of those deaths pressing down on her. She had helped plan similar attacks on other worlds, had watched cities burn and called it victory. But now, seeing the faces of the humans around her, she understood what those victories had really cost. There's another way, she said quietly. But it's dangerous, and I'll need to get back to the fleet, Jake stepped forward. Whatever you're thinking, I'm going with you. No, Zara said immediately. They'll kill you on sight. Humans aren't supposed to board our ships alive. Then we'll have to make sure they don't see me as a threat, Jake said with a smile that didn't hide his fear. You said your people respect strength. Well, I've got something they might respect more. I've got you. General Collins studied them both. What exactly are you proposing? Zara took a deep breath. I propose we surrender. I'll return to the fleet with Jake as my prisoner, claiming I've been gathering intelligence about human defenses. Once we're aboard the flagship, we can access their communication systems and broadcast to both fleets. Broadcast what? The general asked. The truth, Zara said. That this war doesn't have to happen. That both species can benefit from working together instead of destroying each other. The room fell silent. Finally, General Collins spoke. You're talking about mutiny against your own people. I'm talking about peace, Zara corrected. My people follow strength, and they've never seen anyone strong enough to choose peace over war. Maybe it's time they did. Jake moved closer to her. If we do this, there's no going back. You'll be a traitor to your people, and I'll be risking my life on the word of someone I've known for a few weeks. Zara looked into his eyes and saw the same determination she felt. Are you willing to take that risk? For you? For Earth? Yes, Jake said without hesitation, as they prepared for what might be their final mission together. Zara realized that Jake had already conquered something far more valuable than any planet. He had conquered her heart completely. Now she would have to prove that love could be stronger than war, and that sometimes the greatest victories came not from destroying your enemies, but from making them your friends. The transport shuttle carrying Zara and Jake approached the massive Valkyrie flagship through clouds of smoke and debris. Below them, Earth burned in dozens of places where the orbital strikes had hit their targets. Jake sat beside Zara in makeshift restraints, playing the part of her prisoner while she wore her repaired armor and tried to look like the conquering commander she once was. Remember, Zara whispered as the shuttle docked, act defeated but not broken. My people respect courage, even in enemies. Jake nodded, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. They both knew this plan was desperate, but it was their only chance to stop the slaughter happening on both sides. The shuttle bay doors opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and Admiral Kethmordek stood waiting with an honor guard of Valkyrie warriors. He was older than Zara, with scars across his silver skin that spoke of countless battles. His violet eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had never known defeat. Commander Veltar, he said, his voice carrying across the bay. We mourned You, as dead, your survival is most fortunate. Zara stepped off the shuttle with Jake walking behind her, his hands bound but his head held high. Admiral Mordek, I have spent these weeks gathering intelligence on the human defenses. This one was their military coordinator for the region where I crashed. Mordek studied Jake with obvious distaste. And what have you learned from this? Primitive creature? That they are more dangerous than our initial report suggested, Zara said carefully. Their weapons are crude, but their tactics are unpredictable. They fight with desperation when cornered. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Zara noticed the younger crew members looking at her with something like relief. Her survival had become a symbol of Valkyrie superiority, proof that their warriors could survive anything. But she also saw doubt in some of their eyes, uncertainty about the rightness of their cause. The bridge of the Dark Star was a monument to Valkyrie military power. Massive viewscreens showed the battle unfolding across Earth's surface with green markers, indicating successful strikes and red ones showing unexpectedly strong resistance. The humans were fighting back harder than anyone had expected. Your intelligence suggests they would break quickly, Mordek said, gesturing to the tactical displays. Yet they continue to resist even after losing their major cities. They are more resilient than anticipated, Zara admitted. But their infrastructure is collapsing. Complete victory is still assured. While they spoke, Jake was studying the bridge layout with the careful attention of someone who had memorized every detail from Zara's descriptions. The main communication array was exactly where she had said it would be, protected by guards but accessible if someone could create enough distraction. Admiral, a young communications officer interrupted. We're receiving surrender signals from several human governments. They're requesting terms, Mordek smiled coldly. Terms? The terms are simple. Complete submission or complete destruction. Send word to all human leaders that they have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will begin targeting their population centers. Sir, the officer hesitated. Some of the crew are questioning whether civilian targets are necessary. Commander Veltar's survival has inspired them to think we might achieve victory through more selective strikes. The bridge fell silent. Questioning orders was not tolerated in the Valkyrie military, but Zara could see that her supposed death and return had created cracks in the rigid command structure. The younger officers were beginning to think for themselves. You dare question my orders? Mordek's voice was deadly quiet. I merely report what I observe, the officer replied, but his hands shook as he spoke. Zara saw her chance. Admiral, perhaps we should hear what the human has to say about his people's surrender. His insights might be valuable. Mordek nodded grudgingly. Very well. What do you have to say, creature? Jake stepped forward, his voice steady despite the danger. My people are fighters, but we're not stupid. We know when we're beaten. But if you want our surrender to stick, you need to give us something to hope. For hope? Mordek laughed. You hope for survival. That should be enough. Survival isn't enough, Jake said, meeting the Admiral's gaze. People need a reason to live, not just exist. On Earth, we have a saying, you can break a man's body, but if you leave his spirit intact, he'll find a way to fight back. Several bridge officers were listening intently now, and Zara could see Jake's words affecting them. The Valkyrie had conquered many worlds, but they had never learned to rule them effectively. Rebellions were constant, requiring military resources. That weakened the Empire. What do you propose? Mordek asked, curious despite himself. Partnership, Jake said simply. Your people have technology we need. We have resources you want. Instead of conquest, why not cooperation? Because we are superior, Mordek replied automatically. The strong rule the weak. That is the natural order, is it? Jake asked. Because from what I've seen, your people are dying in these endless wars just like ours. Your ships are powerful, but how many of your warriors never come home? How many worlds do you hold by force alone? Murmurs rippled through the bridge crew. Jake was voicing doubts that many of them had harbored but never dared express. Zara watched Admiral Mordek's face grow darker as he realized the human's words were finding fertile ground. Enough, the Admiral snapped. You speak of things you do not understand. Guards, take this creature to the detention levels. But as the guards moved toward Jake, Zara stepped between them. Admiral, I request the right to present my full report before you make any final decisions about the human population. Mordecai's eyes narrowed. You seem unusually concerned with this primitive's welfare, Commander. I am concerned with the effectiveness of our conquest, Zara replied. This human has shown me weaknesses in our approach that could be exploited. His people's response to our attacks has been more organized than predicted. Very well, Mordek said after a long pause. You may present your report, but make it brief. I have a war to finish. Zara moved to the communication console, her heart racing. This was the moment everything depended on. She input her command codes ostensibly to access tactical data, but actually to open a channel to every ship in the fleet and every communication device on Earth. What I learned on Earth, she began, her voice carrying across the bridge and beyond, is that we have forgotten what it means to be truly strong. Morduk started to speak, but Zara continued before he could interrupt. We call ourselves warriors, but we fight only the weak. We claim to bring order, but we create only chaos. We say we are superior, but we destroy everything beautiful we encounter. Commander, you are out of line, Morduk warned, but his voice lacked its usual authority. The bridge crew was listening to every word. I am exactly where I need to be, Zara said, looking directly at Jake. This human showed me something our people have lost, the strength to choose mercy over violence, growth over destruction, love over conquest. The word love hung in the air like a challenge. In Valkyrie culture, it was considered a weakness, something that made warriors soft and ineffective. But as Zara spoke it, she felt stronger than she ever had in battle. You speak of love? Mordecai's voice was filled with disgust. You have been corrupted by these creatures. You are no longer fit to command. Then I challenge you, Zara said, her voice carrying across the fleet. Single combat, as is our right. If I win, both fleets will hear what I have learned. If you win, the invasion continues. The ancient ritual could not be refused, even by an admiral. But as Mordak accepted her challenge, Zara knew she was fighting for more than just two worlds. She was fighting for the future of both species and for the love that had taught her there was strength in choosing peace over war. The combat arena in the center of the flagship filled with Valkyrie warriors from across the fleet. Word of the challenge had spread quickly through the communication channels. And now both species watched as their representatives prepared to fight for the future. Zara stood at one end of the circular platform, checking her weapon and armor one final time, while Admiral Morduk waited at the other end with the confident stance of someone who had never lost a duel. Jake watched from the observation deck, his hands gripping the rail so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had tried to convince Zara to find another way, but she had explained that this was the only language her people truly understood. Strength through combat, victory through skill, and honor through facing death without fear. The challenge is witnessed, announced the ship's senior officer, his voice echoing through the arena. Commander Veltar claims the right to speak for both species. Admiral Mordek defends the honor of the Empire. Let combat begin. The two warriors circled each other slowly, energy weapons humming in their hands. Mordek was bigger and more experienced, with decades of victories behind him. But Zara moved with a fluid grace that spoke of something new, something she had learned during her time on Earth. You have forgotten your duty, Mordek said as they fought, his blade cutting through the air where Zara had been a moment before. A warrior's purpose is to conquer, not to make friends with the conquered. A warrior's purpose is to protect, Zara replied, deflecting his next strike and spinning away from his follow-up attack. I spent weeks with these humans, and I learned what we're really fighting for. Their weapons clashed in showers of sparks as they moved across the platform. Around them, the Valkyrie crew watched in silence, while on Earth, humans gathered around. Screens and radios to witness the battle that would determine their fate. You learned weakness, Mordek pressed his attack, forcing Zara back toward the edge of the platform. These creatures have made you soft, filled your head with their pathetic ideas about peace and cooperation? They taught me what strength really means, Zara said, finding her footing and pushing back. It takes no courage to destroy the defenseless. Real strength is choosing to build instead of tear down. Jake watched his heart pounding as the battle continued. He could see that Zara was holding her own, but Mordek's experience was beginning to show. The Admiral had fought hundreds of duels, while Zara had spent recent weeks learning about compassion instead of combat. "Look around you," Zara called out, addressing not just Mordek but the watching crowd. "How many worlds have we conquered? How many species have we crushed? And what do we have to show for it? Empty planets stripped of resources, dead civilizations, and warriors who know only how to destroy." "We have order," Mordek replied, his blade finding its mark and drawing silver blood from Zara's arm. "We have discipline. We have strength." "We have nothing," Zara said, ignoring her wound. "We are so busy taking from others that we never learn to create anything ourselves." When was the last time a Valkyrie wrote a song or painted a picture or told a story just for the joy of it? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the arena, young warriors looked at each other with confusion. Their entire culture was built on military efficiency, leaving no room for the creative pursuits that humans took for granted. As the fight continued, Zara began to use techniques that surprised even herself. Instead of relying purely on aggressive attacks, she started to flow around Mordek's strikes like water, using his own momentum against him. It was a style influenced by her time watching Earth's natural rhythms, learning from the way forests grew and rivers flowed. "These humans you defend so passionately," Mordek said, breathing heavily as he pressed another attack. "What makes them worth saving? They are weak, divided, and primitive." "They are brave," Zara replied, finally landing a solid hit that staggered the Admiral. "When their cities burned, they didn't surrender. They helped each other, shared their resources, and kept fighting for something bigger than themselves." Jake felt tears on his cheeks as he listened to Zara defend his species with words that came from her heart. She was fighting not just with weapons but with truth, showing her people a different way to see the universe. "Most importantly," Zara continued, driving Mordek back across the platform, "they showed me that love is not weakness. It's the strongest force in the universe, because it makes you willing to sacrifice everything for something greater than yourself." With a final, fluid movement that combined Valkyrie training with human intuition, Zara disarmed Mordek and held her weapon to his throat. The arena fell completely silent as both species waited to see what would happen next. "I could kill you now," Zara said quietly, "and prove my point through violence, as our people have always done. But instead, I offer you mercy and the chance to learn what I have learned." Mordek stared up at her, confusion and defeat warring in his violet eyes. "You would spare me after everything?" "I would spare everyone," Zara said, lowering her weapon and helping the Admiral to his feet. "Human and Valkyrie alike. Because destruction is easy, but building something better takes real courage." She turned to address the watching crowds, her voice carrying through the communication systems to every ship and every world. "I propose a new kind of strength. Instead of conquering Earth, let us learn from it. Let us work together to create something neither of our species could build alone." The response was immediate and overwhelming. On Earth, humans cheered and wept with relief. In the Valkyrie fleet, younger officers began to speak up in support of Zara's vision, while older commanders struggled to process this fundamental challenge to everything they believed. "The humans have resources we need," Zara continued. "But more than that, they have ideas, creativity, and perspectives that could make our empire stronger than conquest ever could. And we have technology and knowledge that could help them reach the stars." Admiral Mordek, still reeling from his defeat, looked around at his crew and saw something he had never seen before: hope. "And if some refuse this partnership? If there are those on both sides who prefer the old ways? Then we'll prove them wrong by succeeding," Zara said with a smile that Jake recognized. "Not through force, but through example." 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the first joint human-Valkyrie research station, watching ships from both species working together to build humanity's first interstellar colony. Beside him, Zara wore civilian clothes instead of armor, her role as ambassador suiting her far better than her old position as conqueror. "Any regrets?" Jake asked, taking her hand in his. Zara looked out at the stars, where human and Valkyrie children played together in the station's gardens, and smiled. "I came here to conquer a world," she said. "Instead, I found a universe full of possibilities I never imagined." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "So who really won in the end?" "Everyone," Zara said, pulling him close as they watched the first mixed crew starship prepare for launch. Everyone won. And in the vast darkness of space, two species that had once been enemies worked together to build something beautiful, proving that sometimes the greatest victories were won not with weapons, but with love.